It's now been 7 months since I relocated to Vermont, and I haven't received a single phone call, message, or email from my parents. There were no questions about my whereabouts, why I had ended my apartment lease, or why the birthday card they sent never arrived. Although, to be honest, they never remembered my birthday anyway. That final day in Burlington remains vivid in my mind. The sun blazed unusually hot for April, making sweat run down my back as I sealed the last boxes. Walker Mason lifted a bin of kitchen utensils with a groan, while Marnie Fielding pressed down the suitcase flaps with her knee. By then, my one-bedroom place was almost bare, save for piles of boxes and the old armchair I hadn't bothered to sell. "You're really not going to tell them?" Marnie asked, wiping her forehead with her hoodie sleeve. "Just a message or something?" I glanced up. I straightened up from the spot where I was affixing a label to a box in the bedroom, marked for donation. They hadn't inquired about my address for 4 years, so why would I bring up the fact that I was moving out? She didn't push back. Instead, she exchanged a glance with Walker Mason, who muttered, "Still wild to me." But for me, it wasn't anything wild. It felt entirely ordinary, just what I expected. For as long as I could remember, I had always been an extra in their family picture. I was quiet, unseen, only acknowledged when I had a purpose. My brother was the focal point, the main attraction, the one who made everyone point the camera. I just faded into the background. The U-Haul we had rented let out a groan as we loaded in the last box. Placing both hands on the door, I pressed it shut, keeping my palms against the metal until I heard it lock. Then I paused, staring at the place I'd called home for 9 years. Not because of the memories I'd made, but for the quiet it contained. "Ready?" Walker Mason asked, spinning the keys around his finger. I nodded in response, my finger resting still. I felt completely prepared. The trip to Montpellier stretched out, quiet and lengthy. I gazed out as the scenery changed, from the city's roughness to dense redwoods, and then to landscapes that became slowly more spacious and open. When we finally crossed into Vermont, I could sense something within me starting to relax. The apartment I'd found for myself was unremarkable. It had just one bedroom, an older kitchen, and a slender balcony facing the woods, but it was all my own. I possessed it in a way I had never truly felt with anything before. I decorated with my own photographs, arranged my workspace exactly as I preferred, and made proper meals without anyone dismissing me or interfering with me. I rose early each day, logged into my job, and tended to the herb pots sitting on the kitchen ledge. Walker Mason and Marnie Fielding came to visit every other weekend. My grandmother, Edith Winter, phoned me once a week, every single week. Nobody else ever reached out. Some nights, that fact struck me as funny. It wasn't a laugh twisted by bitterness, but rather the kind that echoes back faintly inside a bare room. I had disappeared, and nobody seemed to notice. Not until 2 weeks ago. When the phone rang and a familiar name flashed on the screen, I didn't pick up immediately. I simply gazed at it. My father's name felt like it was from another existence. I answered after the 4th ring. His voice sounded terse and annoyed. He told me I needed to return home the following weekend. I should have realized the meaning behind his call. The monotone in his voice wasn't about being let down or confused. It carried a sense of authority. I was being called back, but not for my benefit. I didn't request any clarification. I said I already had things planned and hung up before he could start his routine lecture. Afterwards, I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the pine-covered hills behind my building, and let that familiar heaviness wash over me. It wasn't sorrow, only an awareness. That was the way things had always been. When I reached the age of 8, I earned a spot on the honor roll for the 3rd consecutive time. I set the report card carefully on the kitchen table, knowing it was where my mother would soon sit to have her tea. She cast a quick glance at the paper and murmured, "Good job, honey," without lifting her gaze from her phone. In that same month, my brother got a C++ on a math test and was still allowed to choose what we had for dinner. The same year I took first place at the regional science fair, I walked home carrying a trophy nearly as tall as I was. That morning, my teacher had pulled me aside and told me I should feel proud of myself. I truly was. I hoped my parents would feel that way too. That evening, I set the trophy visibly on the kitchen counter during dinner. My father said, "Let's not make a fuss over this, Avery. My brother has his finals coming up." It was that year I quit bringing my achievements into the house. By the time I turned 17, I understood that paying for college would be my responsibility. I was accepted to a public university in Vermont on a scholarship, picked up 2 part-time jobs, and stopped returning to my parents' place during school breaks. That made things simpler, less complicated. I finished my degree ahead of schedule, rented a room in a shared apartment, and took every freelance gig I could get my hands on. My list of jobs on my resume expanded far quicker than my circle of friends, which never really bothered me. Work was the one thing I had complete authority over. Work never left me sitting alone at the dinner table. In time, I secured a position at a cybersecurity company headquartered in Boston. The job was remote, the hours were flexible, and I received full benefits. By now, I'd spent about 3.5 years with them. My boss, Lydia Hargrove, often remarked that I was particularly good at unraveling problems other engineers tended to miss. My savings account finally had comma marks in the balance. Real groceries were stocked in my refrigerator. My email inbox even contained a letter of pre-approval from a mortgage lender. At 31 years old, I was genuinely considering buying my own home. It wasn't anything major, just my own life. So, when my father's voice tried to reel me in with expectations disguised as family responsibilities, I didn't react. I simply allowed the silence to linger, making it obvious that I wasn't planning to go. "You need to come home next weekend." That was the first thing my father said. Not a greeting, not a question about how I was doing, just an order, delivered as if I were still an 18-year-old waiting for his approval to exist. I leaned back into my seat and gazed up at the ceiling. "Why?" He hesitated. I could almost imagine him rolling his eyes on the other end of the line. "My brother's engagement dinner. Isola's parents want to meet everyone in the family. They care a lot about tradition. Naturally, not an actual reunion or chance to reconnect, just another facade to uphold. Just a daughter-shaped seat to keep up the look of a family. I'm not going." More silence, sharper this time. "What are you saying? You won't be there?" "I'm saying exactly that," I replied. "I've made other arrangements. Avery, this matters for my brother Julian's prospects. They're prominent individuals. If I don't attend, it'll look bad for my parents." There it was again. My parents, never me. Not a word about my well-being or my whereabouts. It was all about appearances. "I moved to Vermont 7 months ago," I answered, keeping my tone calm. "I'm not about to fly clear across the country for a dinner invitation that's just now reaching me." There was silence, an absence of sound that still felt electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. I left for Vermont without letting my parents know, and I realized I hadn't kept in touch before. How could this time possibly be any different? His voice became hard and quiet. How could I leave without notifying my family? "What's my current address?" I almost burst out laughing. Did he even recall where I lived last time? I didn't reply immediately. That alone revealed everything to me. That isn't the issue here. "It is precisely what I meant," I responded. "Your question doesn't come from concern. You're only asking because it's now a hassle to be left in the dark." "Avery, families don't function this way," he said. "No," I replied, "but this has always been the way things are in ours." I ended the call. My hand was steady as I put the phone down. I sat for a while, just letting the quiet fill the room again. Then my phone lit up once more. There was a missed call, then another soon after. I received a message from him, another from my mother, and then from my brother. I didn't reply to any of their messages. Instead, I powered off my phone, brewed some tea, and stood outside on the balcony, watching as dusk slowly erased the remaining daylight. By the following morning, the texts had shifted from gentle reminders to guilt trips, and then from guilt to outright threats. After several days, I had received 6 voicemail messages, 11 texts, and 2 emails with subject lines like, "Can we talk?" and "Family ought to stick together." Eventually, my mother reached out by phone. Her tone sounded strained, as though my mother was making an effort to be affectionate while not veering off her script. "Sweetheart, this isn't like you at all. You've always been such a considerate person. Your brother Julian is depending on you. Raul and Maribel Navarro are traditional, and we need to show a united front. Unity. A term that means absolutely nothing if it's only put on for company." "I'm not coming," I replied plainly. "Avery, don't make this harder than it is." "I'm not," I answered. "I'm just telling the truth." My mother exhaled, clearly exasperated. "It's a single dinner. You don't have to be there long. Just smile, make a little small talk, and then I can slip away if that's what I want." "So, like I always do?" More quiet lingered between us. Then my mother ended the call. Next up was my brother, who sounded much less assertive and more perplexed. "Listen, I don't know what's happening between you, my mother, and my father, but isn't it possible for you to simply arrive?" Personally, I thought I might almost feel something, but it was only nearly there. Still, I recalled every year my father avoided my situation while I was neglected. So I told myself no, not this time. The following morning, my father phoned again. His tone no longer carried any artificial warmth. "If you don't attend this wedding, you're out of the will," he warned me. I allowed the silence to linger, holding off just long enough to give him a little hope. I was truly considering it. Then very steadily and without wavering, I told him, "I earn a higher income than all of you together." On the phone, I heard my father exhale sharply, as if he'd just been struck. "You're faking it." "If you'd ever made an effort to ask about my actual circumstances," I replied, "you'd realize I'm telling the truth." He had nothing to say. He simply ended the call. That was the final call I answered. After that moment, I started to notice the new messages arriving one after another, like tides. Some sounded urgent at first, then grew increasingly desperate, then angry again. I never wrote back to any of them. Instead, I pulled up a new browser tab on my laptop and returned to the real estate listing I had bookmarked 2 weeks ago. The listing hadn't changed. 4 bedrooms, cedar siding, space to plant a garden. My grandmother rang the following morning as the dawn painted the sky pink through the trees. She never checked if I was busy, nor did she wait for me to answer. She would just dial, and I always picked up. "Hello, sweetheart," she greeted me, her tone blending tenderness with that familiar certainty. "What's the weather like up there today?" "Chilly and peaceful," I replied. "Just the way I like it." For several minutes, our conversation shifted to the lavender growing on my balcony and the deer that sometimes wandered behind my apartment building. Suddenly she paused. "They wanted me to call you," she said, simply stating it without apologizing. That didn't surprise me. I replied, "Let me guess. Your mission is to talk me into coming back and act accordingly." Those weren't her exact words. Yet she told me, "Your mother has been restless. Your father, George, has been in a strange mood. They're anxious because they miss you." She paused ever so slightly, with Raul and Maribel Navarro observing and probing her. I quietly chuckled to myself. Naturally, I had become valuable again, but only in relation to someone else's hopes. I'm not going, Grandma. I know. According to her, I wouldn't have gone either. That's the reason I always answered her calls. She was always direct with me. She never defended them or claimed the past was any different. She always remembered my birthday, mailed me postcards from her small adventures, asked about my work, and took time to truly listen. She was the only person who ever met my gaze and recognized me as more than just my usefulness. I simply wanted you to hear it from a truthful person, Edith Winter explained. Not because I imagine you're indebted. I didn't tell them anything. I thanked her. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was, and it was genuine. She seemed unconvinced. I stayed on the call with her until my tea had gone cold. She asked me about the house I was considering, wondering if I would decorate the walls or keep them simple. Our conversation drifted to furniture, fig trees, and topics far removed from duty or responsibility. By the time we ended our chat, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and I had already reopened the mortgage calculator. The ceremony day arrived and passed without my presence. I spent the early hours hiking on a trail just beyond Oakledge Park, meandering between lofty trees and the season's first wildflowers. The quiet out there didn't feel hollow. I felt like I had deserved it. I refrained from looking at my phone. I didn't think about what was going on across the country. I inhaled deeply, allowing the breeze to swirl around me as I continued on my way. When I returned home that night, I discovered I'd missed a call from my grandmother. I dialed her back before I even kicked off my boots. "Hello, darling," she greeted me. "Are you still loving your mountaineer life every minute?" she breathed out, the sound lingering. "So, the ceremony day has come and gone." I paused in anticipation. I could sense that the atmosphere was fraught. It's the sort of strain that seems courteous, but makes my shoulders lock up just sitting there. You know that feeling. My grandmother let out a soft laugh. My parents tried their hardest to appear composed, but my mother couldn't stop fussing. My father barely uttered a word. Maribel Navarro kept darting her eyes around the room as if she expected someone to arrive. Me? Absolutely. And when Maribel noticed I wasn't there, she wanted to know the reason. I shut my eyes and let her words sink in. I asked what they had told her. My grandmother said they gave several explanations. At first, they told her I was ill. After that, they claimed work had contacted me. Gone. Then I told them that I was away for some kind of work event. Nothing but fabrications. Maribel Navarro saw right through it. I could read it in her expression. She insisted even more, questioning why I wasn't present at the engagement celebration either. She also wondered how it was that she had only learned of my presence mere weeks earlier. Evidently, she spoke privately with my mother after the rehearsal dinner. Nobody truly knows the specifics, but my mother emerged looking pale and withdrawn. I have a feeling she was completely seen through. I fought the urge to grin. And my brother? He seemed preoccupied throughout the evening, constantly glancing at the entrance and never holding a smile for long. Isela showed signs of unhappiness during most of the ceremony. I doubted she accepted the idyllic family image they attempted to present. I settled into a chair at the kitchen table, absorbing all of this. It wasn't spite driving me, only that unique sense of satisfaction that honesty can bring. I finally reached the source of the commotion. "They still think all of this is just about a dinner party," I commented. "I know," she answered. "But Raúl and Maribel Navarro witnessed everything. Me, the unevenness, the things left unsaid, the harm caused." We spent another 10 minutes chatting aimlessly. Once our call ended, I lifted the lid of my laptop and browsed recently posted listings. The property I'd been considering was still on the market. Just to be safe, I saved it to my bookmarks again. 10 days after the ceremony, my grandmother rang once more. At the time, I was unpacking a box marked "Kitchen Fragile" when my phone lit up with her name. They're still discussing it, she told me. No explanation necessary. Raul and Maribel Navarro? I asked. They've now questioned Julian about it directly. Why I wasn't part of things? Why did nobody bring me up until everything was nearly finalized? Why have you seemed to vanish? And what did he say? I pressed her. He tried to brush it off at the beginning, she told me, but I get the sense even he is beginning to understand that the issue won't just disappear. Maribel Navarro dislikes being deceived. I placed a pile of dishes down and rested my back against the kitchen counter. Could the marriage already be unraveling? There's a strain, the sort that doesn't simply vanish with a romantic getaway. I didn't feel satisfaction. I wasn't hoping things would collapse for him. Instead, I just felt quiet, as though I was observing waves spreading out on water after I tossed in a stone. They've started making inquiries. Edith Winter said, "Your parents want to know who might have your latest phone number, or where you live. They even asked me again. You didn't share it with them, did you?" "Of course not," I said. "If you wanted to reach out, you'd do so yourself." I let out a measured breath. "Thank you," she went on. "They're anxious, not just about you, but also about what Raul and Maribel Navarro could do or say, or what this might mean for my brother's future. They're focused on managing the fallout," I told her. "They don't care about me." "That's true," she responded in a low voice. "But now they're beginning to see this won't just vanish." The way they treated me left its scars. My eyes wandered over the cozy kitchen, sunlight spilling onto the counters, neatly folded new dish towels by the sink, and a window behind the stove, looking out at a line of pine trees. This place wasn't simply where I stayed. It belonged to me. "They're the ones who vanished," I said. "They just didn't notice until someone else pointed it out." For a moment I remained silent, but in that quiet I could sense her pride, a kind that never needed to be spoken. That evening, I finished putting the last things away in the kitchen and lit a candle beside the sink. Already the house felt like it belonged to me. There it was, a simple white envelope without a return address, but the handwriting gave it away instantly. It was my father's, George Linden's, sturdy, deliberate script, as if he believed tidiness could conceal the past. I lingered by the mailbox for quite some time, the envelope feeling weighty, even though it wasn't. I chose not to take it indoors. Instead, I headed straight for the fire pit behind my house, lit a match, and tossed the envelope in. The paper shriveled inward, darkened, and then crumbled away into cinders. I was already aware of how things would conclude. The following morning, I completed the last documents for the house. I wrote my name on each line. No co-signers, no stipulations, just mine alone. Walker Mason and Marnie Fielding sent me messages about booking flights for the next month. They were eager to check out my new place and to help me put in the first round of flowers. I had already made room in one section of the yard for tomatoes and thyme. Later that night, I enrolled in a graduate class on digital forensics. Not out of necessity, but simply because I wanted to. That month, I also changed my phone number. I only shared the new number with a select few. My grandmother, my boss, Walker Mason, and Marnie Fielding. That was sufficient. There would be no more unexpected phone calls. No more texts disguised as requests for help that were really just obligations. No more family gatherings where I was barely acknowledged. The house felt still, not empty, but genuine. 7 months later, my backyard buzzed with chatter and the aroma of grilled corn and charred peaches. Walker Mason stood at the grill with the focus of a scientist. I watched as Marnie balanced a pitcher of sangria with one hand while carrying a tower of assorted cups with the other. The folding table was crowded with potluck offerings, kitchen-style sesame noodles, and a questionable casserole that someone swore was a family heirloom. One neighbor's golden retriever sprawled out by my feet. Across the lawn, my co-worker's daughter, Sophie Holden, tugged at my arm and presented me with a plastic bracelet she had made from bits of string. "You're my aunt now," she declared with utmost seriousness. "But the kind that's fun." "I'll accept that," I said, as I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist. Later, when dusk had fallen, an acquaintance from a street nearby asked, "Do you have family in the East?" I replied instantly, "No, I no longer do." There was a pause, and then I smiled, motioning toward the table where Walker Mason was doubled over with laughter and had accidentally spilled lemonade on his shirt, while Marnie Fielding was twirling barefoot to a playlist I never remembered creating. But this is what I have now, and I truly felt it. Once everyone had gone home and the backyard was peaceful, I collected the dishes, put the chairs away, and paused by the edge of the garden, the bracelet still circling my wrist. Fireflies flickered along the fence line. Behind me, my home glimmered gently in the evening. It wasn't flawless. Somehow, it was even better. It belonged to me.